Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris Blue Ribbon. I'm here with my brilliant guests tonight, Laura Cortner and Dr. Bob Hieronimus. And I must say, it's an honor to talk to both of you tonight. You are both brilliant people, so it's incredible. And before we hit the break there, I want to make sure that you finished your thought there, Laura.
Oh, I think I was just telling you about La Boule and his face and how you can compare it to that of the Statue of Liberty. And I don't think there's any truth in that concept or that theory, but it does go to show how you can see both a male and a female face, because you look at Charlotte Bartholdi's the portrait of the sculptor's mother, her face next to the Statue of Liberty. There's also a resemblance there, but I think historians have made it clear that Bartholdi was not trying to depict any one particular person. That would have been a mistake on his part as an artist, because it would have taken away from the timeless quality of the statue. And he was intent on making this colossal statue, which is not easy to do something that big, be his ticket to long-lasting fame. So he knew that to make a large statue successful, it has to have a timeless, androgynous quality. He spent a lot of time in Egypt as a young man before he became a successful artist, and he studied those colossals of Memnon and, of course, the Sphinx and the giant structures that they have there. And he writes about it in his book about the Statue of Liberty and how they have this timeless, impassive gaze that sort of evokes both the distant past and the ancient future even. And that's what he was trying to copy, to get that same effect in the Statue of Liberty, and I think he succeeded. It obviously touches people across the board, from every culture, from every religion, and from every country. People have this powerful impact when they see her, and even when they're not immigrants coming in, from some desperate situation to a land where they think they're going to have a better situation. Of course, that's understandable why they would have that feeling. But even tourists, who've seen her in books for 100,000 times, and then they go to see her in person, it's overwhelming. Your tears will well up in your eyes just seeing her. It's just a very powerful, very effective piece of art.
Mm-hmm, right. Well, she reminds me of a Greek goddess. The visual that I see is very Grecian to me. Anyway, that's just what I'm seeing when I look at her.
More Roman than Greek, but Greco-Roman.
Yeah, there you go.
They're mixed together. She's because she's based literally on the Roman goddess Libertas, who was a patron of the freed slaves. And her symbols were the pole and the floppy cap, because in the ceremony when the Romans freed a slave, and they had a huge number of slavery, and at a given time 40% of their population was enslaved. So freeing slaves was a pretty common occurrence, and once a slave was freed, they not only became free, but they had libertas, which gave them citizenship. They could actually become a citizen. So in the ceremony, their head was shaved, and they were tapped with this little pole, and they were given this floppy cap, which is also called a Phrygian cap for this area near modern-day Turkey, Phrygia. And so whenever you see a goddess or a partial goddess wearing this little floppy cap, it means that she's been influenced by liberty, by libertas. The allegorical female that represented Britain, named Britannia, also looks a lot like Minerva, but she's carrying the pole, and she's got the little floppy cap on the top of her pole, because the English were very interested in their own independence and becoming, they were very liberty-minded, much more than their European counterparts. And then in the colonies, where there were English people, of course, but they became even more English than the English in their aspirations to become free and independent, and they had their Indian princess, who was a version of Britannia. She had the pole and the cap, but she had a tobacco leaf skirt and feathers in her hair. She looked like a European woman, but sometimes maybe a little darker skinned in depiction. And she rallied the colonists to liberty. She was crying for liberty, and they used her to become, as I was saying earlier, to identify as a new nation, as a nation of free people.
Mm-hmm. What's really interesting with all this emphasis on liberty and freeing up energy, freeing up the slave programming or enslavement programming, what I'm seeing is almost a reversal here on the timeline, where they're trying to enslave mass collectives of people on a global scale. When you talk about the corporations and all these controlling factors, it seems to me like they really want to oppress. So once again, we do definitely need that goddess rising. There's no doubt about that.
Right. That's what it comes down to. If we can have that feminine resurgence.
Mm-hmm. Well, part of it is due to what we're not being told is happening to our planet. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to go through some terrible times that are going to challenge, make it feel like Noah's Ark all over again. The Statue of Liberty is a symbol that is world loved. There are statues of liberty in China now. All over the world there are Statue of Liberties. It is the most important symbol, American symbol, in the world that is loved because it is like our mom. It is our mother. Something we needed because there was no other feminine symbolism in America's history. And that has caused, again, as we've mentioned before, an imbalance. The Statue of Liberty symbols talk all about balance. Can I talk about that a little
absolutely.
bit?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. When you take a look, and you know this because you already mentioned part of it. When you take a look at what she's holding, that torch that she's holding in her right hand. You know, the right hand symbolically is the hand of action. It's the hand of masculine maleness, getting things done and accomplished. The torch is enlightenment. The founding fathers were deeply involved with the Enlightenment. Where did they get enlightenment from? They were pulling it from Rome and Greece because they did have kind of democracy, kind of, but but you had to have more than land. You had to be a senator, and you certainly had to have wealth, and that balance of that torch of being enlightenment, being activated by the right hand, is really key. Now, there are some fundamentalists that take a look at that symbol and say, you know what that is? You're going to laugh at this one. That is a penis.
You mean the torch?
The torch.
What?
Yes, yes.
I don't see that. Go ahead.
mean, I'm telling you, the extremists, when they translate the Statue of Liberty, they hate her. She's the enemy. She is Satan, the divine Satan, as far as they're concerned. That torch of wisdom, enlightenment, is important, but that's the right hand. The left hand, what is she holding in her left hand? She's holding a tablet. I like to call it a book. And on the cover of that tablet or book is the date July 4th, 1776. It is obviously the birth of this nation. That tablet is like a child, and it was a child as it was being born. It almost did not work. There are many miracles that happened in the founding of this country. Only about a third of our nation was really in big support of independence from England, and if it weren't for the wisdom of a Jefferson, of Franklin, and Adams, and others, we just wouldn't have made it. And if it weren't for secrecy, we wouldn't have made it, because this is so ironic that much of what was going on in Congress was not reported to in the newspapers. It was hidden, because America would have been destroyed from the very beginning of that. But let's go back to that tablet. That is held in the left hand. This is the hand of the feminine. This is the hand of intuition, of love, of wholeness. So when you have in one hand the masculine and the other hand the feminine, she is in balance. And I know you know the chakra system.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've probably studied the Kabbalah. Then you come to what is she wearing? She is wearing a crown. Well, that crown has 7 spikes, 7 levels. That crown in the Kabbalah is called Keter, the top Sephiroth. It is the source of all life. Once again, you have this enlightenment coming through the crown, that what you were looking at is a true goddess, because she is in balance. That's what we need in our country, in the world. We're better off than most other nations, no doubt about it, because in certain Islamic and other nations, women are just they're below the below. So that crown that she earns, well, according to Carl Jung, I'm biased. Freud was very immature for lots of different reasons, and I'm glad that Carl Jung. And have you read his Red Book?
No, I haven't read his Red Book.
It was released like 10 years ago. It is an alchemical book.
Mm.
He only allowed it to be published until many years after his death. It will blow you away. It really will, because Jung says the highest goal of evolution is the crown of eternal life. It's also compared that crown to the symbolic halo from the Christian symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
So the rays of the light from that crown, that 7 levels there, is an enlightened inner being, and she is in balance. And that crown is also the victory of higher aspirations over the lower, baser, natural instincts. So you have got right there a story as to how this symbol of the Statue of Liberty tells a story about us. And there's a part of the Statue of Liberty that is hidden. It's the chain. One of the earlier designs of the Statue of Liberty, she was holding the chain. The chain is under her foot. And that symbolizes, that chain symbolizes both slavery and the chains that bind us to the physical, material world, saying that we are more than just a physical body.
Mm-hmm.
Lord, what a teaching. The chains are beneath her feet to show that this liberty is crushing tyranny. Tyranny is our enemy. And chains were formerly, as I noted, held in the liberty's hand, and that same hand now is replaced by the Book of Law, and chains were also used as symbols. Benjamin Franklin was a great teacher. He had a dismal view of women. I mean, to him and some of the other founding fathers, they why bother? Even George Washington had a tough time with women, but he did realize that without women that were involved with his army, nursing them and taking care of them, and some of them going to war, etc., that it was important to have them along. Yes, and so Our Lady Liberty, it means that American freedom, our freedom is to choose mentally and spiritually. That is the separation of church and state, not to have any one religion, but to have freedom of all religions. And that's what down there in various aspects in some of the red states, they're fighting against that. That is what they really want to achieve. They want this to be a Christian nation that does not and would not accept Catholicism or Mormonism or baptism or none of those would make the grade. A special kind of religion that is basically the same as what we had way up there in North the same religion that killed so many women and men. So when you take a look at the wisdom of this balance, of the Statue of Liberty, it tells a story, and it's an alchemical story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story that, number one, we are more than our physical body. We have a spiritual self, and the spiritual self we can reach through certain methods. One of the methods is through prayer, talking to the deity, meditation, listening to the divine. But most important, and which we do little of, is to serve others without being paid, helping others. The same thing is when you see lands being flooded time and time again, which is going to go on for decades before certain lands just totally go under. That is important to remember in regards to this nation. And unfortunately, corporate powers have fought against this, and they are in control through our media.
Yeah, that's what we were getting into earlier with the mind control. You know, number one, turn off your TV.
Mm-hmm.
But addressing this idea of everything seems to be going crazy right now. You know, the whole world is, as you're saying, speeding up and going down the toilet, and we have this looming environmental upheaval. But social movements, we have to remember, happen one person at a time, one act at a time. You change one belief at a time. So that's why we keep talking about the Statue of Liberty, why we keep focusing on her as a goddess, because that's the idea that could contribute quite a bit to lessening some of these issues that are happening and these emergencies that are happening. Because if we can raise up compassion, which is what the goddess energy is all about, and caring for each other, and emphasize that over and over again, and change that within ourselves, each one of us, one simple act of kindness at a time, as the saying goes. This is all coming down. It's the explosion of this thousands of years of patriarchal dominance, of crush, crush, crush. That's what, win at all costs. But humanity still thirsts for the goddess. You can see this even when she's suppressed, like she has been in our Judeo-Christian society. But you just look for all these substitutes that keep popping up, like the Virgin Mary,
Mm-hmm.
or we call our actresses and our pop singers diva, which literally translates in Italian to goddess. So how we have this need, and we fulfill it in these unconscious ways. But if we can consciously embrace it, perhaps we can shift the whole mindset of America, and the 99% can make the shift that then triples up. Because how we relate to one another and to the earth around us, it would all be affected if we can honor the Statue of Liberty as our American goddess. Goddess veneration is all about honoring our relationship with the earth and with all living creatures. And as this environment is starting to become more of an issue, and if humanity is to survive on the planet, we need to change this domination pattern where we separate everybody into an us and a them, and follow the goddess wisdom with patterns of inclusion and wholeness. And the female archetype is a symbol of perfection, basically. It's one that why the revolutionary generation was using goddess imagery was not because they were in touch with the goddess and the female divine and this powerful female imagery that we're talking about. It was because it was archetypal for them. It was a symbol of virtue and something that they could put up on a pedestal and everybody would aspire to. But it's true that women tend to be less mired in the material world than men. That's what this women's intuition is so stereotypically called. They have a more instinctive contact with the spiritual world. That's what's labeled the women's intuition. The Native Americans would call this that the women had the monthly cycle where they would go off on with their cycles into a cave and basically have a vision quest every month on a regular basis. So the men would perform these elaborate ceremonies just to get in touch with the Mother Earth and with the cosmos that the women just did naturally. And it's this idealism that led to the virtues being portrayed in art as women. So it's this mind shift that we're talking about, the valuing compassion, because gender equality, of course, in humanity overall is the goal. It's all about balance. Action needs to be tempered by wisdom, and men and women both need to use their hearts and their minds. and elevate us all to a new level of humanness, which is neither male nor female. You know, as Bob was saying, we're all 51%, 49%, one or the other. And if we need to move beyond all these hang-ups of the sexes and the differences and becoming conscious of our true androgyny. It's conscious androgyny.
Right. Yeah, it's energy. Yeah, I agree with you. It's energy, frequency, and consciousness. You know, I wrote a book called Transmutation Through Ascension a long time ago, which covers that. And I totally resonate with what you're talking about because if children, say, for example, were able to go to a mystery school at a young age and learn energy, learn frequency, learn the ways of the old way, ancient mystery school teachings of frequency healing and higher consciousness, all of this is a language we understand through like almost a geometric light language. And when you're talking about the Lady Liberty, the spirit of America, or I call the divine feminine, or even the Holy Spirit, the divine presence of the feminine. You know, that's a psychological imprint. It's a psychic imprint. And for those of us who understand consciousness, we automatically interpolate the data. Like for you all, when you wrote this book, you were interpolating the data, I suspect, through research, but a lot of it is through probably your own celestial heritage and cellular memory or intuition. And it's very interesting when I look at this. But yeah, I think that we could change the world overnight if people were to step it up on a higher frequency. But it does take something to help them, and it seems to me like they are looking for something nurturing, and perhaps they feel disconnected from that presence. But I think that has a lot to do with the busyness of society and the lack that they're not educated. They haven't been educated in these areas, and they've almost been derailed by forced indoctrination programming.
Right.
Yes, indeed. That's very, very well said. Very well said. You know, another thing that keeps us in balance in the esoteric teachings, and this is what I was so thrilled back there in 1969 when we were teaching courses. You know, we weren't teaching anything that was new. The Ageless Wisdom teachings, there were many ways to access them. And one of the great teachings that really made a big difference in my life was reincarnation. Because this is not the only life you're going to have. You don't got just one shot at it, and that's it. You live a series of different lives because it takes millions of years to learn how to balance yourself. And so you come back as male or female to learn how you treated the other sex especially. And then you have to go through the pain and the suffering that you caused with on either men or women, depending upon where you were imbalanced. And this balance can be found in all the symbols of the great religions. That doesn't mean they're teachings, but in the symbols. Can I talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay. Okay. Let's take the symbols of three great religions: the Christian, the Jewish, Judaism, and Islam. The cross. What do we got in the cross? What are the basic elements of the cross? You have the vertical line. The vertical line is the ray of light coming down to earth. What is that horizontal line? Oh, by the way, I should say that ray is the masculine. It is a symbol of fire. And that horizontal line is the earth, the feminine, the sun coming down, it's sending its rays in ancient Egypt to the earth. You have the symbol of fire and water there, masculine and feminine. And when you take a look at the six-pointed star, once again, it is fire, the masculine. And it is the inverted triangle, which is water, the feminine. You have the same story being told there it's the balance of the male, female. When you take a look at the Muslim tradition, you have the lunar crescent, which is the feminine. And once again, the star as fire, the masculine. You have that symbolism in balance. Now, when you take a look, unfortunately, when you take a look at the great religions, see, we're just looking at them symbolically in their very pure state. As I mentioned about the importance of symbols. Symbols are the key to consciousness. They are the key to the inner and the outer. And the symbols tell you we're in balance. Now, are these religions in balance?
No.
No, they are not. Especially in each one, it's tragic. It really is. Within the Christian tradition, you're losing today. We don't hear about how Jesus' relationship with women, as they're being some of his best students, and more than students. He shared with women deep knowledge, inner knowledge, and this made other masculine individuals involved in the 12 disciples furious, just absolutely furious. We don't see Christianity in its state that you would find in the study of, say, for instance, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Essenes, and that's not even considered today especially within fundamentalism, especially the sense of the extremist Christianity. They haven't even studied the Dead Sea Scrolls or Gnosticism, which talks about the balance over and over again. Now, when you take a look at Judaism, you got the same problem. They have a very difficult time with, once again, recognizing there is a feminine side of the divine, except within the Kabbalah. In the Kabbalah, you do have that balance, the Shekinah. It is the feminine energy there. But that's not what's being lived in most of those who study Judaism. My wife did an extremely important book. I think it's close to 500 pages on the Kabbalah. It is the most important work I've ever seen on the Kabbalah. And if you'd like a free copy, I'd certainly love to send you.
Oh, my goodness, I would.
Her work, I am glad that I am related to and married to someone who is in balance. It is embarrassing how my state of development that needs further development, as you might say. But I have other friends, male friends especially, that are in the same problem. It took a long time to grow up out of the 40s when jokes were always made about who is the worst driver, who is the least intelligent. The put down of women that I would see every day was their teachings. And in Islam, in the Muhammad tradition, my God, how women are treated is when you study certain aspects of the esoteric aspect of Islam, then you find balance again. But it is rare. It is truly rare. And those that study in that kind of way are going to lose their lives, and women have to suffer greatly.
Well, all religious fundamentalists prioritize pushing women back to their so-called traditional place. It happened in Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union and Khomeini's Iran, of course the Taliban, as we were saying, in Afghanistan, and here in our own country, the theocratic rightist position. It's across the globe. Women are dangerous to men sexually, and they need to be controlled. We learned a lot about this from Stephen Schwartz. If you haven't checked out his book, The 8 Laws of Change, it's really great. And it's this fear that the theocratic right wing has for an empowered woman is actually counterproductive to their own health, because giving a woman control over her reproductive cycle is key to pulling her family, and by extension her country, out of poverty. It's the first thing that women do in a developing country. But, we like the phrase that the Dalai Lama said, that the world will be saved by Western women. And it's pithy, but the idea being that in the West, women have more freedom to become educated, and there's still a long way to go to becoming equal on par as far as income and power in the Senate and so forth. But American women, it's time for them to step up. It's like you. I'm really glad to talk to a woman radio host. It's, most of the times we're interviewed, it's by men. So it's really nice to have a female who's found her voice and her power, and we can speak to her. But American women, I think this is one of our keys here, especially women whose children are grown and have more time to serve their country or their community. They must begin to see themselves as leaders, because these are the women that the Dalai Lama is talking about. Because even though we may not yet think of ourselves as leaders, the West, we have more means, we have more education, more motivation to see the kind of future that's in store for our grandchildren if we just continue along the way we are, with the corporations continuing to feed us this idea that we are just material consumers, and that's our entire job, is to just continue to feed them more money and buy and shop and so forth. And they're just dividing and conquering and waging perpetual war. This is all what we're being fed as our mindset. But the Statue of Liberty is holding up this torch of enlightenment and in wisdom. It's education. She's America's mom. She's our conscience. You see her a lot of times in cartoons as the conscience. She's whispering to us, this is not right. You must, symbolize the qualities of female power. It's strength through nurturing in all of us, men as well as women.
That's well said right there. It's interesting because what I see here is just programming in general with people, insofar as why they're not reaching that level of power or their own personal power is because they're being programmed and they haven't been trained. Once again, they're not taught. It's a linear perception of the false matrix, in my opinion. But it's interesting you talk about the males, because I agree that there's a lot of conflict when it comes down to men have a hard time with strong women. I've come across that myself because I'm a very strong, energetic. And I can tell you, they have a real hard time with strong females. But what's interesting, I think that's part of their ego that's having the hard time with that. That's their, once again, conditioning and entrainment on a linear level. It just needs to be, they need to be deprogrammed, so to speak, in my opinion anyway.
Right. And that's happening gradually, with the second wave, so-called second wave of the women's movement in the 70s. Excuse me. The family is where this changes. And I think that we see this in the so-called millennials. A lot of the men of the younger generation, they just take it for granted that genders are equal, that sexes are equal, and that you can do what you want with your partner no matter what kind of sex they are. And this is because they, in part, were raised by liberated women to realize that there are strong women and strong men and equal strengths, but different strengths. Men and women bring different things to the table. We're a lot alike, but we're also different. So we talk about the Native Americans quite a lot in this book, and one of the reasons is we learn from their matrilineal culture. There's this wonderful story that we entitle "Where Are Your Women?" because this was something that came up a lot in the pre-revolutionary time in the early 1700s. This was a quote actually from a Cherokee leader, and they would go to these peace negotiation tribal councils with the European counterparts and just be shocked that these white people are not bringing along their women to the peace councils, because to them it was natural. The women were the arbiters of the peace and the war. For them, they were the ones who decided when it was time to go to war and when it was not. And I think, you're going to have a lot less war when you put the women in charge of making that decision. And maybe that's because they know how hard it is to actually bring a life into this world and all the pain that involves. And, they're less likely to risk that child to go off to war. Or maybe it's just in their hormonal makeup. Who knows? In any case, they would come and say, well, where are your women? And the Europeans were equally shocked at the question, because they were raised to believe that women were temptresses, and you don't want to put them in charge of any important decisions because they're inferior mentally. That's what they were taught to believe. We've got hundreds of years of conditioning to break out of, and although our revolutionary generation didn't pick that part up from the Europeans, they did pick up the revolutionary idea that they had to separate from the church. They had to separate the government from the church. And at least that part got accomplished. And even though some women were starting to break out and have independent thought, like Abigail Adams very famously asking her husband, don't forget the ladies, remember the ladies when you rewrite these new laws, because otherwise the English common law will continue to suppress women. Men have the tyranny. They had the right to be tyrants over their women legally, and they still do up until the 1970s. In a lot of cases, you still had the right to completely rape or beat your wife no matter what. It was legally allowed.
Terrible.
And even until the ERA is passed, there is no protection for gender discrimination in this country.
Yeah, would you please, this is important. ERA is important. Please go into some detail about this, Laura, because I know that most young ladies think that they are protected and that these laws can't be changed. That's not true.
Well, any kind of advancements we've had have been made through legislation, and all of that legislation can be wiped out if a patriarchal leader or administration was voted in, because it's not constitutionally guaranteed.
If it's not in the Constitution, that when it gets in the Constitution, it can't be changed. And just because you have laws that are that supposedly help and support, and again, this is what's being fought in the religious fundamentalists are fighting this all the time through the elimination of Planned Parenthood, because what's beginning to happen is that children, especially in the red states, when you find out that they have very precarious existences, especially in Texas. There's more children murdered and killed within families in the state of Texas than any other state, and it's just amazing. Without that protection of Planned Parenthood, women do not have control over their bodies. Men want control over women's bodies. And that is taught of course, within the extremist tradition, the puritanical tradition along those lines. We have very few symbols in America that are related to the feminine, and there is one that's extremely important, which has been totally ignored. And even though I've done many shows, and History Channel has allowed me to talk about that, and that deals with the Great Seal of the United States. Most people understand and take a look at the front side of the Great Seal, what's called the obverse of the Great Seal. And what do you have? You have an eagle, which is the more masculine aspect of the eagle. And the eagle is holding in its talons some olive branches, and it is looking towards the olive branch. Its face is looking at the olive branch of peace, and it holds in its other talon arrows which symbolize war, protection. That shows that the eagle is somewhat in balance. However, when you look above the eagle's head, have you ever looked above the eagle's head on the Great Seal, obverse? Well, you'll find a six-pointed star created out of 13 five-pointed stars. Originally, they were 13 six-pointed stars. You have that balance of male-femaleness in a cloud, in the spiritual dimension, not in the physical dimension, but in the spiritual dimension. And that's extremely important because, well, my dear friend, who was mayor and then later on governor, because I did his poster that helped him win the governorship in the state of Maryland, sent me to Egypt, as well as another archaeologist sent me to Egypt, to establish a sister city relationship with Luxor, Egypt, and his name was Anwar el-Sadat. Anwar el-Sadat who I worked for, was murdered by his own Egyptians who were opposed his establishing peace with Israel, Begin at that particular time. And our governor and mayor wanted us, Baltimore, to embrace Anwar el-Sadat's teaching. And that's one of the reasons why I established a sister city relationship with Alexandria, Egypt, and Luxor, Egypt, where all the great temples are, especially dealing with the esoteric side, and Akhenaten. Now, I had the great fortune of meeting Sadat in Washington, D.C., at Georgetown University when he was invited to be honored by the United States. And the thing that I was so excited about was, fortunately, I had a gold coin which had on the front side the Great Seal of the United States. The eagle side is all I've talked about. There's the other side. And I had heard that Sadat believed in reincarnation. He knew of one of his previous lives in Egypt. So when I approached him, I gave him this coin of the Great Seal's front and back. Now, he was the one that pointed out to me. He said, "Look, Bob, take a look above the eagle's head. You know what you got there? You've got Israel above the eagle's head, the six-pointed star." And originally noted that there used to be 13 six-pointed stars that creating a five-pointed star. That symbol was changed, unfortunately. And then he turned it over and he said, look at this. What have we got here? We got Egypt. We got the pyramid. We have the Great Pyramid, Bob. And it is the feminine side of America. It is in balance. Now, it took me quite a number of years. Took 5.5 years for me to achieve my Ph.D., and it dealt with the symbolism of the Great Seal of the United States, and in particular, that pyramid behind a triangle. Now, we have, again, religious fundamentalists that take that symbol and totally distort its meaning and its mottos. What you got there is the feminine side, the mountain. The mountain is the pyramid. Archetypally, Carl Jung would say that is the mother, the breast. And above it is the eye in the triangle over the pyramid. And he pointed that out. And he said, see, this is the spiritual aspect of America. And it tells the story that America needs to stay in balance. That is why he said, I established peace with Israel. It cost him his life. He knew he was going to be murdered, assassinated. I had to go to Egypt several times to establish this sister city with Luxor, Egypt, where the temples are, and during that process, the first times we went under the supervision and protection of Anwar el-Sadat. And unfortunately, what we didn't know, but sensed, that Sadat was hated by the majority of the Egyptians at that time for establishing this peace. It was horrendous when I learned this on our other trips. And even though we went other times to go to the temple of Akhenaten, and because he was an extraordinary pharaoh, in some ways you couldn't necessarily call him a pharaoh, and he his name has been destroyed for a period of time
Mm-hmm.
in Egypt. And only now are we beginning to understand it. So it is amazing to me that the same governor that taught me about the importance of women and sending me to Egypt to establish the sister-study relationship with a leader in Egypt who had a partnership relationship with his wife, Jean Sadat. My wife and Jean Sadat got along like family. And because of his relationship with her, he got himself, in deeper trouble with those who hated him and hated what he was doing. So that symbol, when you take a look at the Great Seal of the United States, and you look at the reverse of the Great Seal, and it says in the eagle's beak, e pluribus unum, one out of many, the many and one, which is a key esoteric statement of the manyness and oneness. An alchemical formula there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look below the pyramid and you see Novus Ordo Seclorum. The fundamentalists today, those that do not want separation of church and state, have totally misunderstood. If you interpreted that in Latin, it reads the new order of the ages. Now, these fundamentalists that I've had to fight for 30 years on the History Channel, Discovery Channel, National Geographic, etc., 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 they interpret it as the New World Order. It is not the New World Order. It is the New Order of the Ages, and the New Order of the Ages is a republic, a representative form of government. This symbol has been vilified through hatred of the fundamentalist Christians who see it as the enemy. It's unbelievable, but true. And again, because it is the feminine side, the same as Sadat was murdered by those who believed his relationship with his wife should have been a dominating relationship. He refused because he did believe that he was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt, and he was here reincarnating because he did believe in reincarnation. He was trying to straighten out a mess that he created as being a pharaoh and dominating women. And it cost him his life. And that's what it is with most of us today through reincarnation. It may cost us our lives to try to change what is really wrong. It doesn't mean we have to take up arms, but it means we have to change our life and put it in balance. And it may cost us our lives, but it's only one life. And you know as well as any others who have studied, especially now people are going to look at Carl Jung entirely differently. He believed in reincarnation. He couldn't have said any of those things. He would have been hated, just as his hassle with Sigmund Freud was one of the greatest, an unfortunate experiences. Freud was his teacher. And when he learned that there was an inner life, not just an outer life, it cost him plenty.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's incredible information you're sharing with us tonight. I must say, I'm so impressed.
I don't share that. I know that I'm free on your show to be able to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing that I learned in regards to the element of Woodstock and what was going on at Woodstock, which I won't go into. because it is sacred. The motto of Woodstock is, "We are one." And if you would have shown that pyramid and eye in a triangle to anyone up there, they would have loved it because they understood the symbolism. Another person that I shared this with, that shared it with me, was Jimi Hendrix. In 1968, I spent time with Jimi Hendrix in New York City, and I was going to be doing record album covers. And what they wanted me to do, when I went up to do record album covers, they told me, well, first they said, look, we have a dysfunction, the suits, the owners, the guys in control, the corporate structure, said we have a dysfunction between ourselves and these musicians. But you with your long hair and you with your beard and your knowledge of Atlantis, reincarnation, UFOs, et cetera, which was the foundation of AUM, you guys will get along. And they were right. When they finished jamming, I think he was up there with Eric Clapton, and they were jamming and having a good time, and he came to me and he said, "You're Hieronimus, the guy that I'm supposed to meet." And he looked down at my journal. In my journal, I always had a dictionary of symbols. I always had the Great Seal of the United States, which I was studying at that time. He looked at that and he said, "What is that? What does that mean, Bob?" He had been studying. He had been studying the Great Seal of the United States, too, when he bumped into it in California at a restaurant who used as its symbol the pyramid, the eye, and the triangle. And he said, "Bob, this is a part of America I know nothing about. It's America's spiritual side. What have you found out?" I wasn't able to teach him then. He knew as much as I did about it. And he actually did drawings of the pyramid and the triangle. When my work was exhibited at various museums, my work was exhibited next to his drawings of the pyramid and the eye and the triangle. Now, I'm sorry to have taken such a long time to go through this.
Oh, not at all. No, not at all. I have to have you back, and I know you're going to be at my other show, Hyperspace, but this is incredible data. Go ahead.
You just wind him up, and he'll just go on for hours.
And that's right. And that's what. But you know, my partner in this book is so much wiser than I am. I may have, in certain ways, better intuition in areas, but she's smarter by far. And when I had to do these murals, a mural that I did called "We the People," which had goddesses in it, when it was about the divine feminine, I was pulled away from this book because I had to complete that mural. She took over on the project. She was the one that made sure that it would be completed in time.
Yeah, you should check out Bob's murals. That one, "We the People," is 1,700 square feet. They're enormous. I think it's 3 or 4 stories high anyway.
Oh, wow.
It's just on the side of a building in downtown Baltimore.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And we have some of those images posted at our website, the secretlifeofladyliberty.com, because as he mentioned, there's a couple of goddesses in that one alone. There's the Statue of Freedom, which is the one on top of the U.S. Capitol Dome, but Bob depicted her as a Native American woman, which she is technically, but he made her very specifically. And there's the Statue of Liberty over there on the right side, very clearly a goddess. And on the left side, there's who is she? She's on top of the Baltimore Memorial.
She's
Lady Baltimore. That's what
Lady
they call
Baltimore.
her, Lady Baltimore. But it's another female allegory for the divine feminine. And in the Apocalypse mural, which is 2,700 square feet, this thing covers an entire room, 4 walls, a ceiling, a stairwell, and it traces the entire history of the world, basically, from Lemuria to Atlantis, through the flood, and then the Indian and the Egyptian civilizations, and on through around to the corporate takeover of America. He's got, in that one, the Statue of Liberty going down in flames. It's a very disturbing image. In fact, any image that I think most people react to whenever they see any kind of disgrace being perpetrated against the image of the Statue of Liberty, it's almost like a kick in the gut, because we identify with that image in a very maternal way. and she is us. And I think that's why the new crop of disaster movies have used her in various ways, where in The Day After Tomorrow she's frozen over, and in Cloverfield her head's cut off, and artificial intelligence movie she's flooded, she's underwater, and of course the famous Planet of the Apes, there she is all buried in sand. So it just shows, and people are like, oh, you don't want to see that, because that is us. That symbol is us. And this is, I don't know how to make this segue any more graceful, but I do like to tell the story about when the Statue of Liberty first went up. It was in the middle of the suffrage movement. So women still didn't have the right to vote in 1886. They didn't have any rights at all, as a matter of fact. And there were a lot of, Susan B. Anthony was active at the time, but there were people that we never hear about in the suffrage movement because Susan B. Anthony outlived them and took over writing the history and sort of wrote herself in as the women's movement, and all these other women like Lily Devereaux Blake. She was the leader of the New York FATE and New York City Suffrage Association.
And Laura, we're just about out of time. I just want to give you a heads up. We're probably going to be out of time in less than a minute.
Okay, then I would just say go to Secret Life of Lady Liberty, see some of these early suffrage images of them dressing up as the Statue of Liberty and what they learned from. And where are your women? Ask everywhere, where are your women? It's a good question to remind everybody, from the PTA to the corporate structure to government. Where are your women?
And once again, it's been an honor. Thank you, Bob. You're incredible. I want to say thank you both. It's been an honor to interview both of you. I'll have you back very soon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dudger and Becky coming up next. Sailing on into the night from Down Under with their wonderful show, as they always do. Everybody have a wonderful week, and thank you again. We'll talk soon.
Night-night.
Night-night.